The headlights of Eleanor Sullivan's aging station wagon cut through the blinding snow, briefly illuminating a weather-beaten "For Sale" sign nearly buried in a snowdrift. Eleanor slowed the vehicle, studying the faded lettering. Meridian. Inquire within. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped the steering wheel tighter, fighting exhaustion and the treacherous road conditions. In the passenger seat, her 15-year-old son Jason slept, headphones askew, his breath fogging the window in rhythmic clouds. The old German shepherd, Rusty, whined anxiously from the back, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the windshield. "We're almost there, boy," Eleanor whispered, her voice barely audible above the howling wind. At 45, the dark circles under her eyes and the premature silver streaking her brown hair told of recent hardships. She glanced down at her rounded belly, 6 months pregnant, what her doctors had called a medical miracle after years of fertility treatments with Robert. But Robert was gone now. Cancer had taken everything: his life, their savings, and finally their home. The medical bills had consumed every penny they had and more. Their house, with its cheerful yellow kitchen and the nursery they just finished painting, was now someone else's. The station wagon crept forward through deepening snow. As they passed the town limits, Eleanor caught glimpses of abandoned storefronts preserved like museum exhibits. A general store with vintage advertisements still visible through frosted windows. A barber shop, chairs waiting for customers who would never return. A small schoolhouse, its flagpole bent at an odd angle, all frozen in time since 1958, when Meridian had been mysteriously abandoned overnight. And now, for 750, the last of her savings, it all belonged to Eleanor Sullivan. "Jason," she said gently, touching her son's shoulder. "We're here." The teenager stirred reluctantly, pulling off his headphones as he blinked at the snowy wasteland outside. His face, so like his father's, darkened with undisguised disgust. "This is it? This is your big solution?" His voice cracked with adolescent rage and grief. "A ghost town in the middle of nowhere? In winter?" "It's shelter," Eleanor replied evenly, though her heart ached at his tone. "It's what we can afford. It's a chance to start over." The grand house on the hill loomed ahead, its Victorian architecture rendered ominous by neglect and darkness. As they approached, Rusty began to bark frantically, his elderly frame suddenly tense as he pressed against the window. "Great! Even the dog knows this is a terrible idea," Jason muttered, pulling his jacket tighter. Inside the house, time stood suspended. Furniture draped with sheets created ghostly silhouettes in their flashlight beams. Dishes still sat on the dining table, as if the occupants had simply stepped away momentarily. Books lined shelves, untouched for 65 years. Eleanor had come prepared with lanterns and candles, which now cast eerie, dancing shadows across the walls. The electricity had been disconnected decades ago, but thankfully the old fireplace was functional. Soon a small fire offered meager warmth against the bitter cold. "I'll check upstairs," Jason said, his tone softer as he noticed his mother's exhaustion. Despite his anger, worry flickered across his face as he watched her ease into a dusty armchair. Left alone with her thoughts, Eleanor rubbed her pregnant belly, feeling the baby shift inside her. "We'll make this work," she promised quietly. "We have to." Rusty remained vigilant, his gaze tracking something invisible across the room, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Have you ever had to start over in the winter of your life? Join Eleanor as she uncovers the secrets of Meridian in this snowbound town. The temperature plummeted as night deepened. Eleanor added more logs to the fireplace, grateful for the stockpile she'd found on the covered porch. Jason had claimed a bedroom upstairs, his earlier hostility softened by exhaustion. Rusty, however, remained alert, his attention fixed on the darkest corner of the living room. "What is it?" "Boy," Eleanor whispered, peering into the shadows, nothing but the occasional creak of the old house settling. Shivering despite the fire, Eleanor decided to search for additional blankets. In a hall closet, behind stacks of yellowed linens, her hand brushed against something solid, a leather bag, cracked with age but still intact. Pulling it into the firelight, she gasped at the name embossed on the side. Dr. Thomas Sullivan, M.D. Sullivan, she murmured, tracing the letters. Her married name, Robert's name, now belonging only to her and Jason. A strange coincidence. The doctor's bag contained instruments from another era. A stethoscope with a wooden chest piece, glass vials with dried remnants of medicines, rolled bandages brittle with age. At the bottom, tucked into a side pocket, Eleanor found an envelope. The paper yellowed but preserved. Written on the front in elegant script was a name that made her blood run cold. For Eleanor Sullivan, her name, her exact name. With trembling fingers, she opened the envelope. Inside was a letter dated December 8, 1958, one day before Meridian was abandoned. My dearest Eleanor, it began, if you are reading this, then what I feared has come to pass. You have found your way to Meridian, as I always knew you would. The child you carry is the reason. There are forces at work here that I cannot explain. The mine has yielded something extraordinary and terrible. They think none of us know, but rumors spread in small towns like wildfire. I've hidden what you'll need in a place only someone who shares my blood would think to look. The key enclosed will help you find the truth. Trust no one who comes asking about Meridian. They've been watching this place for decades, waiting for someone to return, waiting for you, with hope across time, Catherine Sullivan. Eleanor's hand instinctively moved to her belly, where the baby kicked vigorously, as if responding to the letter. A small brass key had fallen from the envelope onto her lap, unlike any modern key she'd seen. This is impossible, she whispered to the empty room. How could a letter written in 1958 bear her name? How could Catherine Sullivan have known she would come here, pregnant, decades later? The sound of tires crunching through snow broke her reverie. Headlights swept across the front windows as a vehicle approached the house. Rusty barked, racing to the door. Eleanor tucked the letter and key into her pocket before opening the front door. A rugged pickup truck had pulled up, chains on its tires. A man in his 60s with a weathered face stepped out carrying several bags. Evening, ma'am, he called over the wind. Name's Ray Jennings. Heard from Cedar Grove someone had finally bought Old Meridian. Figured you might need supplies before the big storm hits. Big storm? Eleanor asked, helping him carry the bags inside. Ray nodded gravely, stomping snow from his boots. Weather Service says it's going to be the worst blizzard in decades. Might drop 3 feet by morning. He glanced around the house. Not many folks brave enough to come to Meridian, especially in winter. It was affordable, Eleanor replied, not wanting to admit her desperation. Ray's eyes softened. Well, town's got history. People didn't just move away, you know. They vanished. One night, December 1958, during a snowstorm like the one coming, whole town, gone by morning. What happened to them? Official story was a gas leak from the mine. Evacuation for safety. Ray's voice dropped. But folks who grew up around here know better. No one ever came back. No moving vans, no forwarding addresses. Just gone. He looked at her intently. There are stories about this place. Strange lights, noises no animal makes. And sometimes on nights when the snow falls just so, people see things that shouldn't be there. The wind howled louder outside, rattling the windows. Rusty growled again, hackles raised. I should get going before the roads become impassable, Ray said, handing Eleanor a piece of paper. My number at the general store in Cedar Grove. It's 40 miles, but I make deliveries this way when weather permits. After Ray left, Eleanor stood by the window, watching his taillights disappear into the swirling snow. Their isolation settled over her like a physical weight. No neighbors for miles, no cell service, and now a blizzard coming to cut them off completely. Later that night, Eleanor woke suddenly. Something had pulled her from sleep. A sound? A presence? She went to the window and froze. Through the veil of falling snow, she saw it. A pale blue light glowing from the windows of what appeared to be the mine office building down the street. A light that shouldn't be possible in a town without electricity. As she watched, a shadow moved across the illuminated window. A human silhouette. Someone else was in Meridian. Morning brought no reprieve from the storm. Snow continued to fall in thick, silent curtains, already piling halfway up the first-floor windows. Eleanor found Jason staring out at the blanketed landscape, his expression uncharacteristically pensive. "Did you see that light last night?" he asked without turning. "In the building down the street." Eleanor felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty house. "You saw it too?" "I think someone's living in one of the buildings," Jason said. "I saw a shadow moving." "We should check it out," Eleanor decided, trying to sound braver than she felt. Bundled against the bitter cold, they forced their way through snow drifts to the mine office. Rusty plowed ahead, occasionally disappearing completely into deeper drifts before emerging with a snort. The building stood silent, windows dark in the gray morning light. Inside, dust covered everything, except for a single chair that appeared recently disturbed, and footprints on the floor that ended abruptly in the center of the room. "Someone was definitely here," Jason whispered, his earlier skepticism giving way to unease. Eleanor approached a bookcase filled with ledgers and pulled one out. Inside were meticulous records of the townspeople's purchases from late 1957 through December 1958. In the margins, the shopkeeper had made personal notes. J. Miller, nosebleed again, third this week. L. Peterson, dizzy spells, doc gave medicine. T. Walker, rash won't heal, wife worried. Similar notations appeared with increasing frequency in the months leading up to the town's abandonment, all documenting symptoms, nosebleeds, headaches, dizziness, unexplained rashes, and most disturbing, multiple mentions of miscarriages and stillbirths. "Mom, what is this place?" Jason asked, his voice smaller than Eleanor had heard since he was a child. "I don't know," she answered honestly, "but I think something very wrong happened here." They continued their exploration, making their way to the schoolhouse. Inside, students' work still lay on desks, pencils placed neatly alongside. On the chalkboard, written in elegant script, December 9th, field trip to Memorial Park. Permission slips due tomorrow. A field trip that had never happened. As they turned to leave, Eleanor felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She clutched the teacher's desk for support as a trickle of warm blood ran from her nose. "Mom!" Jason rushed to her side, alarm replacing his usual teenage indifference. "Are you okay?" "Just dizzy," she assured him, accepting his supporting arm. "Probably the cold." But a chill of recognition ran through her. The same symptoms noted in the ledger. The same symptoms Catherine had documented 65 years ago. Back at the house, Eleanor was just making tea when Rusty began barking frantically at the front door. Through the frosted glass, she could make out the figure of an elderly woman struggling through the snow. Eleanor rushed to help her inside. The woman was small, frail, her white hair contrasting sharply with her dark woolen coat. She leaned heavily on a walking stick, breathing hard from exertion. "I had to come," she gasped as Eleanor helped her to a chair by the fire. "Before the big storm hits, I knew you would be here." "Who are you?" Eleanor asked, wrapping a blanket around the woman's shoulders. "Martha Collins. I was just 13 when they took us away from Meridian." Martha's rheumy eyes fixed on Eleanor's face with unsettling intensity. "Good Lord, she was right. You look exactly like Catherine." Eleanor felt the room tilt slightly. Catherine Sullivan? You knew her. Martha nodded, accepting the cup of tea Eleanor offered with trembling hands. She was the doctor's wife, a nurse herself, smartest woman I ever knew. She glanced at Eleanor's pregnant belly. She was expecting two when it happened, about as far along as you are now. What happened here, Martha? What made everyone leave? The old woman's face darkened. The official story was toxic gas from the mine. They came in the night, government men in dark suits, told us to pack one bag each, that we'd be back in a week when the air cleared. No one ever came back. She leaned forward, voice dropping. Catherine knew better. She worked as a secretary at the mine office part-time, saw documents she wasn't supposed to see, started asking questions nobody wanted answered. About what? The sicknesses, the miscarriages, all started 3 months after they opened Section C of the mine. Martha's gnarled fingers curled around the teacup. Catherine believed they found something down there, something that wasn't supposed to exist, something underneath the permafrost. A loud crash from upstairs interrupted them. Jason appeared at the top of the stairs, face pale. Mom, there's someone up here. I saw a woman looking at me through the bedroom mirror. Martha's cup clattered to the floor. She's trying to reach you, she whispered, before they come. You need to find the secret room before the great storm buries everything again. What secret room? Who's coming? Eleanor demanded, but Martha was already struggling to her feet. I've stayed too long. They watch this place. Always have. Find the room behind the bookshelf on the second floor. Catherine left everything there, all the evidence, all the truth. She grasped Eleanor's hand with surprising strength. History is repeating itself, dear. The same storm, the same pregnancy, the same danger. But you can break the cycle where Catherine couldn't. As Martha departed, refusing Eleanor's offer to drive her home, the first flakes of the promised blizzard began to fall, larger, thicker than before. The wind rose to a howl, bending trees nearly horizontal. Have you ever felt the past reaching out to grasp your present? Share in the comments and continue listening to Eleanor's story. By morning, the world outside had disappeared beneath a blanket of white. Snow piled against doors and windows, trapping them inside more effectively than any lock. The temperature in the house dropped steadily despite the fire Eleanor kept burning. Her breath formed white clouds in the air as she climbed the stairs to the second floor. Catherine's letter and key clutched in her hand. She found Jason in his bedroom, huddled under blankets, staring at the wall. I had a dream last night, he said without preamble, about a woman who looked just like you. She was running through the snow, pregnant, terrified. Men were chasing her. He turned to Eleanor, his eyes haunted. It felt so real, Mom, like I was there. Eleanor sat beside him, sharing the warmth of her blanket. I need to tell you something, Jason. Something impossible. She showed him Catherine's letter, explained the coincidences that felt less like chance with each passing hour. So you think this Catherine person, what? Knew you were coming? Jason asked, skepticism warring with the evidence of his own experiences. I don't know, but Martha mentioned a secret room. Catherine's letter says she hid something in a place only someone who shares my blood would think to look. I need to find it. Jason nodded slowly. I'll help you. For the first time since Robert's death, mother and son were united in purpose. They systematically searched the second floor, looking for anything that might conceal a hidden room. In the hallway stood a tall bookcase filled with medical texts, Dr. Sullivan's collection. Eleanor ran her fingers along the shelves, looking for mechanisms or hidden catches. Wait, Jason said suddenly. In the letter, Catherine mentioned a key. Eleanor pulled the brass key from her pocket. It didn't match any keyhole they'd seen in the house. Too small for doors, too large for most drawers. Look, Jason pointed to a small brass plate in the wood near the edge of the bookcase. Does it fit there? Eleanor slid the key into what appeared to be a decorative keyhole. It turned with a satisfying click. Slowly, silently, the entire bookcase swung inward, revealing a small room beyond. Unlike the rest of the house, this space was untouched by time. No dust, no decay, as if sealed in a perfect vacuum for 65 years. A desk sat in the center, papers arranged neatly upon it. Filing cabinets lined one wall. On a small table by the window stood a photograph in a silver frame. A young woman, heavily pregnant, smiling at the camera. Catherine Sullivan. The resemblance between them was undeniable. Not just similar features, but identical down to the small scar above Eleanor's right eyebrow that she'd had since childhood. It wasn't just that Eleanor looked like Catherine. They could have been the same person. Eleanor's hands shook as she opened the leather-bound journal on the desk. Inside, Catherine had documented her investigation into Western Consolidated Mining's operations. It began with her suspicions about water contamination, but culminated in a horrifying discovery. The company hasn't just been mining for traditional minerals. Eleanor read aloud. In Section C, they uncovered something else, a substance government scientists call Chromium X. It doesn't match any known element. It absorbs radiation without becoming radioactive itself. It stores energy indefinitely. Some kind of new fuel source, Jason suggested. Eleanor continued reading. The substance appears to have biological properties. It responds to proximity. Changes form subtly when observed. Miners report hearing whispers near the extraction site. Others experience vivid dreams, premonitions. More disturbing were Catherine's notes about the health effects. Chromium X exposure correlated perfectly with the onset of symptoms throughout town. The nosebleeds, headaches, and most alarmingly, the reproductive complications. The final entries chilled Eleanor to her core. December 8, 1958. They're coming tomorrow. I overheard Wilson on the phone with Washington. They're evacuating the entire town under the pretense of a gas leak. The substance doesn't just affect perception of time, it can actually bridge temporal distances. I believe this is happening to me now. The dreams are getting stronger. I see her clearly, the woman with my face who will find Meridian decades from now. She's pregnant just as I am. Sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see her looking back. We're connected across time, our children linked by forces I don't understand. Eleanor sat heavily in the desk chair, one hand on her belly where the baby kicked vigorously. Mom, Jason's voice was tight with controlled fear. What does this mean? Before she could answer, the ancient rotary phone in the hallway rang, a sound that should have been impossible in a house without active phone lines. They stared at each other for a long moment before Eleanor moved to answer it. Hello? She said hesitantly. Static crackled, then a woman's voice, distant and unclear. Eleanor, find the birth records. Facility 17. They're coming with the storm. Who is this? Eleanor demanded. Catherine, I am you. You are me. Find the truth before they arrive. The line went dead. Eleanor slowly replaced the receiver, turning to find Jason watching her with wide eyes. We need to find Dr. Sullivan's office, she said with new determination. Catherine mentioned birth records, medical files. Together they bundled up against the bitter cold. Outside, the snow had temporarily stopped, though dark clouds promised more to come. They trudged through waist-high drifts to the small building with Dr. T. Sullivan, M.D., still visible on the frosted glass door. Inside, patient files remained in wire baskets, prescription pads yellowed on the desk. In a locked cabinet that yielded to Catherine's key, Eleanor discovered what they sought, a separate collection of medical records, each documenting a pregnancy in Meridian from 1956-1958. The files told a grim story. Of 26 pregnancies during that period, only 7 resulted in live births. The rest ended in miscarriage, stillbirth, or medical termination due to severe abnormalities. Dr. Sullivan had kept meticulous notes, including his suspicions about the connection to the mine. The final file was Catherine Sullivan's own. Unlike the others, it contained detailed notes about Chromium X, water testing results, and a timeline correlating increased mining activity with pregnancy complications. "My own wife," Dr. Sullivan had written in shaking script. "7 months along, baby appears normal thus far, but Catherine showing elevated lead levels. Mercury present in hair sample. Confronted mine manager Wilson today. He denied everything, threatened to have my license revoked if I spread rumors. Cannot remain silent. Someone must be held accountable." The last entry, dated December 8, 1958, read simply, "Catherine preparing documentation for authorities, moving everything to the hidden room tonight." As Eleanor closed the file, a wave of dizziness overtook her, stronger than before. Pain stabbed through her abdomen. Sharp, warning. "Mom?" Jason's voice seemed to come from far away. "Mom, your nose is bleeding." Through the pain and disorientation, Eleanor heard the sound of vehicles approaching. Looking through the frosted window, she saw 2 black SUVs pulling up in front of the grand house. "They're here," she whispered, remembering Martha's warning. "Just like Catherine said they would be." Snow began falling again as Eleanor and Jason made their way back to the house, staying out of sight behind buildings. From their vantage point, they could see 2 men examining the property, one in an expensive overcoat, the other in a black parka with no insignia. "We need to get back to the secret room," Eleanor whispered. "There must be more evidence there." They slipped in through the back door, making their way quietly upstairs. In the hidden room, Eleanor returned to the filing cabinets, pulling open drawers labeled by subject: medical records, company memos, government documents. In a folder marked Operation Blackout, she found the smoking gun, a classified government document detailing the plan to evacuate Meridian. The material designated Chromium X displays properties inconsistent with known elements, she read. Test subjects report experiencing memories with unusual clarity or glimpsing what they describe as future events. EEG readings show brain activity patterns normally impossible in conscious subjects, specifically activities suggesting the simultaneous processing of past, present, and future stimuli. "What does that even mean?" Jason asked. "It means this substance somehow affects time perception," Eleanor said. "But according to Catherine, it goes beyond perception. She believed it could actually create connections across time itself." Another file contained operational details, new identities for Meridian's residents, relocation to different states, families kept intact, but community bonds severed. Children placed in special observation programs disguised as elite schools. Adults with highest exposure levels committed to treatment facilities. And Catherine Sullivan, designated a priority alpha subject due to her advanced pregnancy and prolonged exposure to Chromium X. The final page noted, Subject C, Sullivan scheduled for secure transport to Facility 17 for continued monitoring of pregnancy. Unborn child shows unusual development patterns consistent with second-generation Chromium X exposure. Expected delivery date, September 17, 1958. Eleanor's hand trembled as she opened the next file. Inside was a birth certificate for baby girl Sullivan, born September 17, 1958, at Facility 17. Mother, Catherine Sullivan. Father, Thomas Sullivan. Clipped to it was a second document that made Eleanor's blood run cold, her own birth certificate. Same date, same location, listed as adopted birth mother unknown. "I don't understand," Jason said, looking over her shoulder. "Are you saying, I think I'm Catherine's daughter?" Eleanor whispered. The baby she was carrying when Meridian was evacuated. A heavy knock at the front door interrupted them. Male voices called from below. "Mrs. Sullivan, We're with Western Mining Corporation. We need to speak with you about your property. Eleanor and Jason exchanged alarmed glances. Quickly, they closed the hidden room, the bookcase sliding silently back into place. They made it downstairs just as a second, more insistent knock came. Eleanor opened the door to find exactly what she expected. The well-dressed man from the SUV, accompanied by his more official-looking partner. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Edward Wilson, CEO of Western Mining Corporation." The name hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Wilson, the same name as the mine manager who had threatened Dr. Sullivan in 1958. "This is Special Agent Thompson from the Department of Energy. May we come in? It's rather cold out here." Eleanor reluctantly stepped aside. Wilson removed his expensive leather gloves, revealing manicured hands that had never seen a day of manual labor. "I'll be direct, Mrs. Sullivan. We've recently learned that this property has been sold, and we're concerned about potential environmental hazards in the area. There's a risk of snowslide with this storm, particularly near the old mine." "How interesting that you've monitored this abandoned town so closely," Eleanor said, keeping her voice neutral despite her racing heart. "Especially since no one has lived here for 65 years. A flash of something, irritation, alarm, crossed Wilson's smooth features before his professional smile returned. "Western Mining maintains records on all its historical properties. Safety concerns, you understand." Agent Thompson, who had been silently assessing the house, finally spoke. "Ma'am, this location is potentially hazardous, especially for someone in your condition." His eyes flickered to her pregnant belly. "We're prepared to offer you compensation to relocate." "Compensation?" Eleanor echoed. Wilson nodded, reaching into his coat for a checkbook. "We're authorized to offer 100 times your purchase price, $75,000, immediately transferable. More than fair for a ghost town in the middle of nowhere." The cold calculation in his eyes told Eleanor everything she needed to know. This wasn't about safety. It was about containment, about keeping Meridian's secrets buried, just as they had for 65 years. "That's very generous," she said carefully. "But I'm afraid we're quite settled here. The storm makes travel impossible anyway." Wilson's smile tightened. "Mrs. Sullivan, I'm afraid you don't understand what you're dealing with here. This storm is forecast to worsen considerably. Roads could be impassable for days. We have vehicles capable of leaving now. For your safety and your son's, I must insist." "And I must decline," Eleanor said firmly. "But I appreciate your concern." Thompson stepped forward, his posture subtly more threatening. "Mrs. Sullivan, there are national security considerations you're not aware of. We can return with the proper documentation to compel evacuation if necessary." Jason, who had remained silent, moved protectively to his mother's side. "You should leave now," he said, his voice deeper than usual, more man than boy. "Our dog doesn't like strangers, and he's in the back room." On cue, Rusty began barking ferociously from the kitchen. Wilson assessed the situation, then nodded curtly. "We'll be back tomorrow, Mrs. Sullivan. I strongly suggest you reconsider our offer by then." After they left, Eleanor sank into a chair, her hands shaking. "They know, Jason. They've been watching this place for decades, just like Catherine said they would be." "What do we do now?" Jason asked. Eleanor placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby move inside her. "We find the truth about who I really am, and why Meridian called me home." Morning brought a brief respite from the storm, though weather reports on the battery-powered radio warned of a historic blizzard approaching by evening. Eleanor and Martha sat at the kitchen table, steaming mugs between them. The elderly woman had returned, determined to help despite the danger. Catherine believed the government never truly understood what they found in the mine, Martha explained. They saw it as a weapon or energy source. They didn't recognize it as a doorway, a bridge between moments. "But how am I connected to her?" Eleanor asked. The birth certificate suggests I'm her daughter, but there's more to it than that, isn't there? Martha nodded slowly. Catherine was taken to Facility 17 after the evacuation. They told us she died in childbirth during the snowstorm, but I never believed it. She reached into her coat pocket and withdrew a faded photograph. This was taken 2 weeks before the evacuation. Eleanor studied the image. Catherine Sullivan standing in the snow, one hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly, the grand house visible behind her. The resemblance was beyond uncanny. It was as if Eleanor were looking at herself. "There's something else you should know," Martha continued. "After Meridian was evacuated, I was relocated to Denver with a foster family. Years later, I became a nurse working at various government facilities. In 1973, I was briefly assigned to a place called Rehabilitation Center 17, the same Facility 17 where Catherine was taken." "You worked there?" Eleanor leaned forward intently. "Only for 3 months before they transferred me, but I saw the records. Catherine Sullivan didn't die in 1958. She was kept in Facility 17 for 5 years, then released under a new identity. They took her baby, you, and placed you in the adoption system. Catherine spent the rest of her life searching for you." Eleanor's mind reeled. "Did she ever find me?" Martha's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know, but she never stopped looking. And she did something else, something brilliant. She invested every penny she earned in the stock market. By the time I tracked her down in 2012, she was living under the name Elizabeth Carter, and she'd amassed a fortune. She died 3 months ago," Martha continued softly. "Her last act was to arrange for Meridian to be listed for sale at exactly the right time, when you would need it most, when you would be pregnant, just as she had been. She believed the cycle had to complete itself." "What cycle?" Jason asked, having listened silently until now. "Chromium X doesn't just connect random points in time," Martha explained. "It creates quantum entanglement between genetic duplicates, mother and daughter, sharing DNA, becoming mirrors across decades. Catherine believed you needed to come to Meridian to break the loop, to expose what happened here." Eleanor felt a strange certainty settling over her. "I need to see the mine," she said suddenly, "where it all began." Despite Martha's protests, Eleanor and Jason prepared to venture to the mine entrance. The brief clearing in the weather provided their only chance before the next storm hit. "Be careful," Martha warned. "The substance might still be active, especially in the cold. That's why everything happens in winter. Chromium X becomes more potent in freezing temperatures." The mine entrance stood half-collapsed on the side of the mountain. Timber supports rotted and broken. Warning signs hung from a rusted chain across the opening, their red paint faded but still legible. The company name above the entrance, Western Consolidated Mining, matched the letterhead Eleanor had seen on documents in Catherine's research. As they approached, Eleanor noticed something odd. Despite the freezing temperature, warm air seemed to be flowing from the mine entrance. Not just warm, but strangely humid, carrying a metallic smell that caught in the back of her throat. "Do you feel that?" she asked Jason, who nodded, his expression wary. "Mom, maybe we shouldn't—" Before he could finish, a voice called from the darkness inside the mine. Not quite human, more like rushing water or wind through leaves, forming syllables just on the edge of comprehension. "Catherine?" Eleanor froze. "Did you hear that?" Jason nodded, his face pale. Someone said, "Catherine." Eleanor took a step closer to the entrance. "I'm not Catherine," she called. "My name is Eleanor Sullivan." The whispering grew louder, still indistinct but unmistakably forming words. "Child, danger, storm comes." Then between one heartbeat and the next, the darkness at the mine entrance seemed to gather itself, condensing into a shape that was almost human. But wrong, too tall, too fluid, as if composed of smoke and shadow. Eleanor stumbled backward, nearly falling. Jason caught her arm, pulling her away. "Mom, we need to leave. Now!" They retreated quickly, not stopping until they reached the edge of town. Behind them, the strange wind rose again, carrying that whispering voice that was somehow both warning and threat. Back at the house, Eleanor tried to make sense of what she'd experienced. Her rational mind suggested explanations. Unusual air currents, stress-induced hallucinations, but none explained the voice that knew Catherine's name or the darkness that had seemed to reach for her. "Mom!" Jason's urgent call came from outside. Eleanor hurried to join him in the yard, where Rusty was frantically digging in the snow, whining with determination. "He started digging as soon as we got back," Jason explained. "Won't stop." As they watched, Rusty's paws struck something solid. Jason knelt to help, brushing away snow to reveal a metal box, its surface remarkably well preserved. Using a screwdriver from the house, they pried it open. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a stack of documents. On top lay a birth certificate, Eleanor's true birth certificate, unaltered. Born September 17, 1958, at Facility 17. Mother, Catherine Sullivan. Below it was a letter, dated just 2 years ago. "My dearest Eleanor," it began, "by the time you read this, I will be gone. My name was Catherine Sullivan, though I've lived most of my life as Elizabeth Carter. I am your mother, but I am also you, or rather, you are me, in ways science cannot explain." Eleanor read aloud, her voice trembling. "Chromium X created a temporal loop, binding 3 generations of women together across time. Myself, you, and the daughter you now carry. The government never understood what they found. They thought it was a weapon, but it was a doorway, a means for consciousness to transcend linear time. The cycle repeats every generation, the mine, the pregnancy, the storm, the escape. But this time can be different. You have what I never had, the full truth, allies who believe you, and evidence that can't be buried again." The final paragraph made Eleanor's breath catch. "The baby you carry is the key. She will be born with immunity to Chromium X, the culmination of changes that began with that first exposure in 1958. When the agents return, do not let them take her. She will break the cycle that has bound us across time." As Eleanor finished reading, the first heavy flakes of the predicted blizzard began to fall. The wind rose suddenly, shaking the trees with violent force, and with it came a stabbing pain in her abdomen, so intense she doubled over. "Mom?" Jason's panicked voice seemed distant through the fog of pain. "Mom, what's wrong?" "The baby," Eleanor gasped. "She's coming. 2 months early, just like Catherine's did during the storm." The blizzard descended with apocalyptic fury, transforming the world outside into a howling white void. Inside the grand house, Eleanor fought through increasingly intense contractions. Jason had helped her to the bedroom, where Martha now wiped her brow with a cool cloth. "It's too fast," Martha murmured, concern etching deeper lines in her already weathered face. "First babies don't usually come this quickly." "Catherine's did," Eleanor gasped between contractions. The same pattern, repeating. Outside, the wind screamed against the windows, finding every crack in the old house's defenses. Snow piled higher by the minute, sealing them in more effectively than any lock. The temperature inside dropped steadily, despite the roaring fire Jason maintained downstairs. "We need more blankets," Martha instructed, "and boil water if you can." As Jason left the room, Eleanor grabbed Martha's hand with surprising strength. "If something happens to me, you have to protect the baby. Don't let them take her. Wilson will be back. He'll know when she's born." "Nothing's going to happen to you," Martha insisted, though doubt shadowed her eyes. "You're going to break the cycle, remember?" Another contraction seized Eleanor, this one so intense that her vision darkened at the edges. As the pain peaked, Something extraordinary happened. The temperature in the room suddenly rose, becoming almost uncomfortably warm. A soft glow appeared near the doorway. Not electric light, but something more diffuse, like moonlight through fog. It coalesced, taking shape as Eleanor watched with equal parts wonder and terror. A woman stood in the doorway, translucent, her edges blurring into the darkness, but unmistakably Catherine Sullivan, wearing the simple dress from the photograph, one hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly. Martha gasped, crossing herself instinctively. "You see her too?" Eleanor whispered. Martha nodded, speechless, for perhaps the first time in her long life. Catherine moved into the room, not walking but gliding, and gestured toward the bed. Her meaning was clear. Eleanor needed to prepare for the final stage of labor. As another contraction hit, Catherine's translucent hand moved to Eleanor's lower back, pressing in a way that somehow eased the worst of the pain. "How is this possible?" Eleanor asked when she could speak again. Catherine's free hand rose to her lips in a silencing gesture. Then she tapped her chest and pointed to Eleanor. The message was clear, even without words. "I am you. You are me. We are the same." Jason returned with blankets, freezing in the doorway as he registered the spectral presence. "Mom?" His voice cracked with fear. "It's okay," Eleanor assured him, though nothing about the situation was remotely okay. "She's here to help. She's Catherine." The labor intensified over the next hour, contractions coming one after another, with barely a moment's respite between. Outside, the storm reached its peak, the wind so loud it sounded like a freight train passing directly overhead. The old house groaned and creaked under the assault, but held firm. Catherine remained, her ghostly presence bringing an inexplicable calm to the surreal birth. When Eleanor's strength began to flag, Catherine placed both hands on her belly and closed her eyes. A warmth spread through Eleanor's exhausted body, impossible strength flowing into her muscles, steadying her racing heart. Catherine's form began to fade, growing dimmer, as if transferring her very essence into Eleanor. "She's giving you her strength," Martha murmured in wonder. With a final surge of borrowed strength, Eleanor pushed. A cry tore from her throat, echoing through the empty house. Then another cry joined it, smaller, higher, indignant. The newborn's first breath, first sound. The storm ceased as suddenly as it had begun. The wind died away to nothing, leaving an almost painful silence in its wake. Morning sunlight broke through the clouds, streaming through the bedroom window. In its golden light, Eleanor held her daughter, small but perfect, her tiny fists waving in protest at the bright new world. "Catherine," she whispered, looking to where the spectral form had stood. Only a faint luminescence remained, hovering near the doorway. As Eleanor watched, it pulsed once more, like a silent farewell, then faded completely. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered to the empty air. Jason approached cautiously, looking down at his new sister with wonder. "Is she okay?" "She's so small." "She's perfect," Martha assured him after examining the baby. "A fighter, just like her mother, and her grandmother." Eleanor cradled her miracle child, overcome with a sense of completion that transcended explanation. The temporal loop hadn't just connected them. It had brought Catherine back one last time to ensure her daughter, their daughter, would survive to break the cycle. In her arms, the newborn's eyes opened. Eyes with a strange, knowing depth no infant should possess. Eyes that held the wisdom of generations, the culmination of a journey spanning decades. "Hello, Catherine," Eleanor whispered to her daughter. "Welcome home." The sound of vehicles approaching roused Eleanor from exhausted sleep. Afternoon light filled the bedroom, where she lay with her newborn daughter nestled against her chest. The baby, whom she'd named Catherine, Cat for short, slept peacefully, untroubled by the commotion outside. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. Jason burst into the room, his expression a mixture of alarm and determination. "They're back. Wilson and more government guys. At least 4 of them." Eleanor struggled to sit up, clutching Kat protectively. "Help me downstairs. I need to face them." "Mom, you just had a baby," Jason protested. "You can barely walk." "Then carry me if you have to," Eleanor insisted. "I'm not hiding. Not anymore." With Jason's support, Eleanor made her way slowly downstairs, each step sending waves of pain through her still recovering body. She settled in the living room chair just as a forceful knock came at the door. Martha, who had dozed in the corner, awoke with a start. "Don't answer it," she warned, but Eleanor nodded to Jason. "Let them in." Wilson entered first, his expensive coat dusted with snow, followed by Agent Thompson and 2 additional men in tactical gear. Wilson's eyes widened slightly at the sight of Eleanor holding the newborn. "Mrs. Sullivan," he said, regaining his composure quickly, "I see congratulations are in order." "What do you want, Mr. Wilson?" Eleanor asked, her voice stronger than she felt. "In light of your condition, our offer has become more urgent. We're prepared to double it, $150,000, and immediate medical evacuation for you and your children to the nearest hospital." "Generous," Eleanor acknowledged. "But I think we both know my daughter is worth far more than that to you." Wilson's professional mask slipped for a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. "Mrs. Sullivan, you don't understand the situation. That child is the 3rd generation affected by Chromium X," Eleanor finished for him. "The culmination of changes that began when your grandfather's company discovered something they shouldn't have and covered up the consequences." Wilson stiffened. "My grandfather, Richard Wilson, mine manager in 1958, the man who ordered Operation Blackout to silence Catherine Sullivan." Eleanor's gaze was unwavering. "The same Catherine Sullivan who was my mother, and in some inexplicable way myself." Agent Thompson stepped forward. "Mrs. Sullivan, you're clearly disoriented from childbirth. You need medical attention." "What I need," Eleanor countered, "is for you to listen carefully. Every document Catherine collected, every memo, every medical record, every classified file about Chromium X and Operation Blackout has been digitized and sent to multiple sources with instructions to release everything if anything happens to me or my children." This was a bluff, but Eleanor delivered it with such conviction that doubt flickered across Wilson's face. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he warned. "The substance found in that mine has national security implications you couldn't begin to comprehend." "I understand more than you think," Eleanor replied. "I understand that your company has spent 6 decades exploiting Chromium X for military applications while covering up its effects on the people of Meridian. I understand that you've been waiting for Kat to be born because she represents something you've never achieved in your research. Natural immunity to Chromium X. The ability to control its effects rather than be controlled by them." The front door burst open, admitting a blast of cold air and several figures. Ray Jennings first, followed by 4 elderly men and women Eleanor didn't recognize. "Thought you might need some backup," Ray said, stomping snow from his boots. "Brought some friends who have a stake in this conversation." One of the elderly men stepped forward, his bearing military despite his age. "William Cordell, formerly Michael Peterson until 1958. I was 10 when they took us from Meridian, gave us new names, new histories, told us never to speak of what happened here." He fixed Agent Thompson with a hard stare. "Your agency has been monitoring us our whole lives, but we remember." Wilson assessed the shifting situation, clearly calculating his options. "This is absurd. You have no proof of these wild accusations." Eleanor reached for the folder Martha now handed her. "Catherine's last letter. She lived to be 89, Mr. Wilson. Spent her life tracking your company's activities while searching for the daughter taken from her. When she finally found me, Too late for us to meet. She arranged for me to find my way here, to Meridian, to finish what she started. She extracted several stock certificates from the folder. She also invested wisely over 6 decades. These represent controlling interest in several major media companies and, interestingly, a significant stake in Western Mining itself. Wilson's face drained of color. That's impossible. Check your shareholder records, Eleanor suggested. Look for Elizabeth Carter, Catherine's identity after Facility 17. She leaned forward, wincing at the movement. You have 2 options, Mr. Wilson. Leave us in peace and cooperate with a full investigation into what happened here, or face not only criminal charges, but a corporate takeover that will destroy your family legacy completely. For a long moment, the room was silent save for Kat's soft breathing. Then Wilson turned abruptly and left, his men following after a hesitant glance from Agent Thompson. They'll be back, Ray warned after the vehicles had departed. With more authority, more men. I'm counting on it, Eleanor replied, shifting Kat gently in her arms. But next time, they'll be facing not just us, but the press, congressional investigators, and a very expensive legal team courtesy of Catherine's investments. With Catherine's meticulously organized financial records, Eleanor assembled a formidable legal team. The stock certificates her mother had acquired over 6 decades represented not just wealth, but strategic influence. Eleanor directed her attorneys to file injunctions against Western Mining while simultaneously alerting key congressional committees with oversight authority. The press conference she organized featured not just her story, but testimonies from a dozen former Meridian residents, each holding a piece of the 65-year-old puzzle. Martha's testimony proved invaluable during the congressional hearings. Her 3 months working at Facility 17 had given her access to records that confirmed the government's ongoing monitoring of Chromium X subjects. I made copies, she revealed to a stunned committee, producing yellowed medical charts she'd hidden for decades. I always knew someday someone would need to know the truth. As spring thawed Meridian, the truth thawed as well, emerging from its 65-year hibernation. Eleanor's story, backed by Catherine's meticulously preserved evidence, created a scandal that couldn't be contained. The settlement, when it finally came, was historic. Not just financial compensation, but full acknowledgement of responsibility and funding for permanent remediation of the site. Most significantly, the Department of Energy was ordered to release all files related to Operation Blackout and Chromium X. 1 year after her arrival in Meridian, Eleanor stood on the newly constructed observation deck overlooking the town, now designated a historic site and research center. The mine remained sealed, concrete now filling the entrance where timber had once stood. Scientific teams monitored the area continuously, though no trace of Chromium X had been detected since the night of Kat's birth. Kat, now a thriving 1-year-old, babbled happily in her stroller. Jason, who had discovered a passion for documentary filmmaking while recording testimonies from former Meridian residents, adjusted his camera settings nearby. Ready for the tour group? Ray asked, approaching with a clipboard. The guided tours of Meridian had become surprisingly popular, drawing visitors fascinated by the government cover-up and the town frozen in time. Eleanor nodded, glancing up at the grand house on the hill, her home now, renovated with a portion of the settlement funds. Sometimes, on snowy days, she still caught glimpses of movement in the upstairs windows, a translucent figure watching over them. As a gentle spring breeze carried the scent of new growth, Eleanor reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her here. At 45, when she thought her life was ending, it had instead been reborn, not just for her, but for Catherine, whose determination had transcended time itself to find justice. Kat reached up, her small fingers grasping Eleanor's with surprising strength. Those knowing eyes, so old in such a young face, held the wisdom of generations, the culmination of a cycle now finally broken. We did it, Eleanor whispered to her daughter, to Catherine, to herself. We found our way home. Sometimes the coldest blizzards bring the warmest new beginnings. Share your thoughts about Eleanor's story and subscribe to hear more inspiring stories like this one.